now we're going to have Steve and Karen engage with one another over what they heard from one another, and then eventually move this out into a discussion from the whole community here. So you guys are all mic'd up, and Karen, let's start here, and or if either one of you both of hearing each other's stories, what is there a question you guys have now for one another, or provoked by one another, just for you two to have a discussion about hearing one another's stories?
One of the things that I found really interesting as you shared was the willingness of the lady to go around and take toilet tissue to people, whether she knew them or not, just knowing that that's such a dire need in a lot of circumstances. Was that something that she supplied on her own, or was there a resource where she could go and get, because I would assume that she passed out a lot of toilet tissue, I would assume.
Yeah, that was part of what we were collecting and distributing, is we were getting a lot of food, and then it became very clear: diapers, toilet paper, soap, personal care items, and bottled water, for some of the folks that were out all the time on the street. So
I'll just say it's always been interesting to me that we have a number of pantries, and one of the most dire needs that they have are for those kind of products. I wish, and this has been something that has been on my heart for a long time, I wish that the state, when they allocated food stamps, that they would designate, even if it's just $25 a month or $50 a month of what that person receives. I wish they would allocate that to each person so that they could take care of their personal hygiene. We want people to work, and it's been my experience that a lot of people who are on public assistance, they want to work. But when you don't have what you need to keep yourself presentable, it's hard to go to a job interview when you haven't been able to maintain your own hygiene. So it just seems to me that I understand the need is for food, but there's also a vast need for resources so that people can take care of their personal needs. And one of the things that we do at Trinity in supporting the food pantry on our campus is we do provide, we take up collections for those kind of products. And the pantry always tells us, those go first, because there's such a great need. So I say that to all of you. I know I see a lot of people shaking their heads. You already know that. But that is a way of really addressing some of the needs that our pantries have, is for personal hygiene products.
So something you were talking about that I would love to hear kind of the journey in this part is, it started out, and I think you called it was the benevolence committee, or, and obviously it's moved from that sense of things to now where partners in the work that you're doing are people who also are there for dinner, and they get connected to, helping out. Both stories were people who, by being present there, got themselves, sweeping floors or serving food. Or so how did that journey, what did you see as what happened to get people from the benevolence to we're a community gathered for food, and we're a community gathered for?
I think one of the things that helped to change the focus of our benevolence committee is having someone there to talk to them about what community needs were all around them. They really wanted to do wonderful work, and for a large part they were. Addressing through grants, helping to fund programs. That granting program, or that committee, which we later changed the name from the Benevolence Fund, Benevolence Committee, to the Trinity Outreach Grants Committee. And the focus of that committee has changed so drastically that after a lot of conversation with members of the church and through my work of getting out into the community and talking to our neighbors and finding out what some of the needs were at that time and bringing that information back to that committee, we no longer have that huge budget that I talked about with the grants committee, because what we decided to do was take those funds and actually put them at work on campus. It helped us to establish the Trinity Outreach Center. We have tenants in that building now that, because of the financial support from Trinity, they don't pay the same rental rate as other agencies along just Meridian Street, because we use funds to lower their rental rate. These are organizations that are also 501c3 organizations, nonprofit, and they're addressing issues that are common and of concern to the church. So we have one of our first tenants is the Neighborhood Christian Legal Clinic, which provides legal services, helps immigrants with their immigration papers and et cetera. We have our Mid-North Food Pantry, and it does the work that it does. We also, years ago, because there was an agency that provided affordable child care, they lost their funding many years ago and they had to close down, and it was, Trinity was heavily involved, as well as Christ Church was involved in board activities and helping to sustain that organization. But when it lost its overall funding and had to close, one of the missions that I took on as being extremely important for that neighborhood was to find another child care provider that we could bring into the Trinity Outreach Center to provide those services to fill that gap. And they stayed with us for about 5 years. They outgrew the space, and that area on the first floor of the Trinity Outreach Center stayed vacant for about 1.5 years. But during that 1.5 years, we were exploring what else could we bring in to fill that space that would address some of the needs of the community. And so a group of members from Trinity, along with some community members, got together, and the end result is now we have a program housed there that's called the St. Nicholas Early Learning, Inc. And it's an infant child care program that addresses the needs of folks that are on low income as well as regular paying folks. They've gone through this process called, just because I want to say it now, there are different levels of qualification to make sure that it's a top-notch child care ministry. And so we're very pleased that that change was made, because as the parish became aware of the needs around it, we started addressing our financial stability in a different way.
It's a key theme that keeps on coming up, is this allowing your identity as a church to be formed by the needs of the community.
Absolutely.
And now in the 21st century, where a lot of Episcopal churches are really trying to figure out where is our place in this community, since people are not coming in through those red doors.
Yes.
Can you both talk to this idea of your churches, your ministries definitely seem to be in response to the mending
Yes.
that's been used, to the need, to a purpose, a drive that said, this is who you need to be formed into, because this is what the community is calling us to, as opposed to the church saying, hey, you guys should come and do this. You're saying, wait a minute, hold up. They're telling us who we can be for them.
Absolutely.
So you could, and then you found what we'd say your missional voice. So can you both talk to the courage to do that? Because I'm sure that you had to change some things up. You had to change some budgets. You had to change some programs. You had to change identity, change the voice in the community. Just the courage to do that, and as a leader, how you were able to lead that spiritually, Was it through preaching, through praying, or just putting your foot down saying, this is the direction we're going? Because I think a lot of people maybe out here are experiencing the same kind of thing, saying, I think out there, there's something different that we're being called to. But how do you get over that hump when maybe your church community right now is not there yet?
So what was an important moment for us is we early on had a storyteller come in, and we put up the flip charts. Many trees die for our meetings, and we had a kind of session about what's the earliest memory people have of 1900 to 1910, and not that anybody there remembered it, but they knew the story. So they took us through this process, and sitting in the corner was a woman from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, took lots and lots of notes, and she wrote it up as a feature story and shared it with us. And the story was called Gathering at the Table. And so so much of what made it possible for us, alongside of a couple of other things, was just, there are elements that we already have in place, but they get stuck in time. So people hearing Gathering at the Table made complete sense to them. So having, there's an organic farm school that we partner with, and having them in there doing classes and teaching people to cook and grow their own vegetables, that was a really, that made sense to people. Like, oh, yeah, it's still about food, it's still about the table, it's still about... So I think that was one element that was really important, is not coming at people with some model or story, but really following the model of opening a space and listening and sensing. And so we have, a number of things have happened because people say, oh, well, that's like what we used to do. And instead of that being, resistance to change, it's honoring our elders. It's honoring our community. It's honoring this place that's been a parish since the late 1800s, and doing things like what have been already going on, just in a different way. So that continued piece of honoring, and because there have been moments when I have been really frustrated because I continue to discover that the world doesn't work the way I would like it to work, And then you add people, and it really gets to be like that. And the people that are there because they care, because they make a choice to be there. They have history, and the new people, newer or new, same thing. So it's just finding, what are those themes that are generative themes, and then that's where a lot of the energy to do the work shows up. Yeah. So I hope that wasn't too...
One of the first things I did when I started at Trinity was I decided I was going to walk throughout the community and introduce myself. And I only wanted to ask one question, and that was, a couple of questions. Those questions were, do you know where Trinity Episcopal Church is? And are we a good neighbor? That's all I wanted to know. Sometimes when people saw me coming in, they saw my collar. Of course, they didn't want to answer the door, or they'd speak through the door. I don't want to talk about church. And I said, no, I don't want to talk about church either. I want to talk about the community. And they were more receptive. I learned a number of things about the perception of our neighbors about Trinity Church. Many of them knew that on our campus, we also have a school, St. Richard's Episcopal School. They knew about the church, but many of them didn't know about Trinity. I mean, they knew about the school, but they didn't know about the church. So that struck them as somewhat odd, that we didn't have a presence. And this was back in 2002 and before. So the church didn't have a visible, viable presence to our neighbors. That was one thing. The other is they didn't like they didn't understand why we had this great big gate or fence around the property. They didn't like that. And I was able to address the fence by saying, you know, society has changed so that we have to protect our kids because we have children there at the school. And then I was able to point across the street at the public school and say, look, there's a fence around that school as well. We're doing the same thing. It's about taking care of our kids. I also learned that they wanted to know what the church was all about. I learned some things, and I took that information back to the church. The other thing, when we started dissecting some of the information that I was getting from our neighbors, I learned some things about what some of the needs were, and I talked about that. Because of my prior work in social services, and we did all kind of programs and had all kind of services, but we had our fingertips on data that helped us to know about different neighborhoods. So I knew in advance that there was a high level of unemployment in our area. There was a high level of people on fixed incomes. Trinity sits in a predominantly African-American community, and yet there are places right around where there's some integration. But Trinity is predominantly a white parish with some diversity. When we started exploring the idea of starting the Sunday dinner, some of the feedback that I started getting, as well as people on my committee, and they were people not only that were members of the church, but from the community as well, some of the information or comments that started coming back to us was, well, you know, this parish isn't going to let those people in here. Those people. And so I said, okay, I got to figure out a different way to approach this. And so my committee and we decided to go and meet with every group, every ministry in the parish, and talk about the need and talk about how this was going to work. And that warmed the hearts of our people. The interesting thing is, one of our first volunteers to sign up to assist with the dinner is a lady who at that time was 90 years old. And she came to me and she said, this is something we have to do. And because she became a volunteer, some other people started coming together. So talking and listening to our neighbors, going out and being a part of community meetings and organizations, that was the big part of my work the first few years that I was there. Getting to know our neighbors getting to know us, explaining who we are, what we want to do, and by all means, I keep saying this, working with the neighbors. You know, sometimes we get in this position where we think we know what's good for somebody else, but we don't ask them about it. Mm-hmm. And we go ahead and we build these wonderful programs, and people don't come. And so because of my prior work, I knew that doesn't work. And so we started inviting people to the table. We started going out and talking to them and hearing their input and inviting them to help us to do a lot of the things that we're doing. And so that's our story.
Yeah, it's the theme from yesterday, this idea that what happens in this space is the big rehearsal to get us out for the real call that's out there in the neighborhood. And so to refer back to Steve, there's been measures left out of this music that's being written up here, and so you guys are going to fill it in. Any questions now from you all of how we can start making some music here? And I think we already got Day as a hand up, and these two good-looking gentlemen will be handing out mics here.
Hi, I'm Day Smith-Pritchard from the Episcopal Evangelism Society, and Mother King, you started to touch on this. What I want to hear is more about what I'm sure has been the transformative spiritual effect on the members of your congregation, the people who are doing this work and the people who are supporting it in other ways? How do they understand themselves as Christians differently because of what you've done? Thank you.
Thank you. I spoke with a lady not recently, and she's been working with this ministry since we started. And I asked her, what makes you keep coming back? Why do you keep serving? And she said, you know, this ministry has helped me to meet people I never would have met before. And she said, and it has changed me because I didn't know. I rarely come in contact with African Americans, and sometimes I don't even come in contact with Hispanics, but they come to this dinner, and I've gotten to know people, and I care about them, and I found that the more I get to know people and their plights, my heart goes out to them. And so it's that relational process that begins, that has changed the hearts of many people. We have 6 teams that are responsible for serving every 6 weeks. And there are about 10 to 12 people on each team, but every team have co-leaders. And some of those co-leaders, or team leaders, I should say, have been with us since we first started over 10 years ago. That is a ministry that they have embraced. They have found that they have changed, and they also know that they're helping to change the lives of others. Because just like there are white people that have never dealt with black people, there are black people that have never dealt with white folks. And so there's this exchange. The other thing that we incorporated into our ministry is that we've encouraged our volunteers to sit down and eat lunch with our guests. And so many of them do. And then if they don't want to eat, still sit with them and develop a conversation. And so I hope that answers your question, but it's about building relationships.
Was there a spiritual transformation you saw with people when their faith has helped them? I think, Dave, you also referenced that as well. Have you witnessed that?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, our baptismal covenant talks about respecting the dignity of every human being. And that spiritual transformation, I think, has taken place in many people just because their heart has changed. They just never knew folks who are struggling, who are poor. And so their heart has changed. One lady who likes to lead the devotion, because we do a grace before every meal, and sometimes that grace is led by our guests. But she talks about the fact, and she told our guests, she says, you know, this isn't something that I just do on Sunday when I'm with you every 6 weeks. She said, you talk about some of the needs that you have, and I pray about those things. That's something she never would have done before. So it's been that kind of change, that kind of opening of heart and listening to people and not being afraid of people who are different than you and me. But it is about caring enough to listen, but also caring enough to take that first step, which is having a conversation with someone, getting to know that person.
Another comment?
I'm Jim Harrington. I'm from the Missional Community, Proyecto Santiago in Austin, Texas, and I commend the terrific work you're doing. I want to raise a question. The other foot that we walk on is the foot of justice. It's described in our baptismal covenant also. And I'm really interested in knowing if you all have been engaged in organizing for social justice, particularly interfaith organizing to make change. For example, issues of food security, maybe with a local city council, or for example, what work is going on, interfaith probably, in Ferguson to deal with issues of race and poverty that have surfaced, so that we could get a kind of a perspective on that. Thank you.
So I mentioned the Walker Leadership Institute in Eden, and both of those are spaces where a lot of work is being done. We talk in the Walker Leadership Institute about leadership for the common good, and people out of the seminary, again, faculty, students, and others, have been very active in an organization, Metropolitan Congregations United. Missouri does not have a minimum sustainable wage. So there are things that we've participated in as St. Stephen's and the Vine that support organizing. Certainly, what I was trying to say at the very end is we're probably have taken some steps about it's service, not serve us. We're still earlier in trying to take the steps about justice, not just us. Two quick snapshots. The community, Ferguson as a community, has experienced a set of things that we've been able to partner with. And included in that is the Ferguson Youth Initiative, which is very much an empowerment and engagement kind of strategy. And then Ferguson's community and neighborhood organizations. So we're the living room for a number of those conversations, which after Michael Brown was killed, Beth Felice is the diocesan coordinator for communication. And I should mention the Reverend Dr. F. Willis Johnson, who's been extraordinary in putting up with my stuff and shaping me. Heidi knows him. His book, Holding Up Your Corner, is a powerful text on how to engage racial equity in your congregation. But anyway, Beth Felice said to me, isn't it interesting that all these interviews about what's going on in Ferguson are being done by white men clergy? There went my special role as a spokesperson for all things just and true, right? And so she was right, and she did it gently, but she let me know something that I would say was really powerful and important, because I've seen people sort of make careers out of Ferguson. What it meant is that Willis was the person that I would then say, have you talked to Willis? Have you talked to him? He called me up one day, I was just after church, and he said, damn, you're making me famous in Germany. Because he was getting those kinds of calls. So I think part of the justice work in our space has been being led, and being led by people who are doing the work and doing it well and have been doing it for quite a while. And so our food incubation strategy is because sustainable wages in our immediate area are hard to come by, but people will supplement their earnings, whatever they have, by doing some lawn work or some baking or some other things that help them get enough money to live on. That's a justice work. We've been partners with various kinds of activities, but I would just say the toggle or the tension is being led and also knowing who's doing really good work and not trying to duplicate that work, but be a platform or a space for that work to happen.
I'm Lisa Fishbeck from Church of the Advocate in Chapel Hill, and I'm very interested in community partnerships. And you keep speaking, Steve, about partnering with, and I looked at the Vine website, lots of really good stuff. I'm wondering, is the Vine a separate organization from the church? How is it structured? Is it a 501c3? Is it made up of people from these various partnerships? What is the Vine? And when you talk about partnering, how much of that is providing space or becoming an equal stakeholder? Or can you flesh out for me more about these separate projects of the Vine and how it's funded?
So we got to the notion of the Vine because, as I said, when we started walking around in the community and talking to people, they felt friendly, people who weren't already there. They felt friendly to St. Stephen's, but it was still we're invited to come into your building when you're doing fundraisings or other kinds of things, and our liturgy in the context of where we are is indecipherable for many people. And so, that a person who was then there and working, who'd done a lot of community engagement in Louisville, said, well, why don't we call it the Vine? Because we want it to grow and different things can, graft it on. And so it's not a 501c3. It's a separate identity, though. A lot of people know the Vine that, don't know St. Stephen's or kind of know St. Stephen's. Everything that's been kind of emergent. So it's partnerships that's everything from like Strings Attached is a guitar program because the kids commit to playing in public and serving with their music. That's something we fund. We raise money, but the person who runs it has also raised money. So if you're music geeks, one day you got a check from the Les Paul Foundation and the foundation that is supported by your tickets when you go see Fish. Right? So he's done great stuff there. So that's the thing we house it, we fund it. He's on the staff. Two things like if anybody ever breaks into our building and the police say, who has keys to your building? I'll be like, who doesn't have keys to our building, right? So it's space and place. Sometimes it's just that people are meeting there. Sometimes it's that we help with funding. Sometimes it's, the whole program is like a piece of it. But it's just continued to grow. So most of everything that you see in the partnerships wasn't a strategic plan. It was opening a space and people saying, hey, what about this? Or why don't we work on this? Or so. Yeah.
Hello. So my name is Hugo Olayas. I do Latino ministry for the National Church, but I come here mostly as a member of my local vestry with my rector here, and we come from Southern Ohio, what I would describe as small parish. I would try to use the musical metaphor that it has been suggested. Our parish does mostly what they do in terms of outreach, I would call, is a monthly dinner. We provide a monthly community dinner, and we take turns with the other mainline congregations in our small town. And I feel that you guys are like Annabelle Steinbacher playing Tchaikovsky's violin concerto on your violin, and I'm here with my little xylophone trying to play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Can you say something that will help me, or that would help address the breach?
I want to say something. Our total budget at St. Stephen's and the Vine is $250,000. Half of that money comes outside of the parish. We have 50 people in worship on a Sunday. So we're not a big programmatic place. And so all of these things that have been generated have really come because people have shown up and wanted to work on them. And so I don't know if that speaks to you, but when you say like Tchaikovsky and stuff, I'm like, I feel like, and I'm grateful, but I feel like we're sitting around in the living room playing music. I don't feel like we're Tchaikovsky. And the best news for the people who are playing the music is that I don't sing, because I've been invited by 2 church choir masters when I've been on staff to not sing near their choir because I mess their choir up. So I just sit there and get to enjoy the music. So, yeah.
Our budget for the Sunday dinner is about $27,000. And out of that comes our stock for supplementing the meal, salaries for 4 people, and all of these are part-time positions. 3 of them are Sunday-only positions, and the other position is 3 days a week. If we had to provide this ministry without the support of Second Helpings, which is a major organization here in the city that rescues food and prepares meals and then distributes those meals to churches and other nonprofit organizations. If we did not have them to help us, because they provide the entree, then we might not be able to do that ministry. Because they're part of that foundation. We're grateful that we have the support of Second Helpings and our umpteen volunteers that make that ministry work. We couldn't do it if we didn't have the volunteers, because we have to have people there to help prepare the meal, clean up, set up, all of that. So I will say, when we first started, that first Sunday we had 37 people to come to the dinner. Now we have over 100, usually about 140 every Sunday who come. But at times it used to be larger than that. So it has taken time for that ministry to grow and be what it is. But I'm grateful for the steadfastness of our partners who have made that ministry work. Because you're starting off small, as you said, you are still meeting a dire need. And so I would just encourage you to continue.
You're asking the most important question. Where does your community need mending?
Yeah.
One last question here from Ms. Heidi.
Hi. So I love your term anticipatory hospitality. It was very clear to me that you did that, and you talked about you actually had to do research, Mother King, and this notion of just going out into the neighborhood. A priest in New Hampshire recently introduced me to the term substitutionary atonement, which is, I don't have to do that because the rector is doing it, the priest is doing it. How do you move from substitutionary atonement to anticipatory hospitality?
See, hang with Heidi whenever you get the chance. Yeah.
I'll let you jab in first.
All right. So I say that I'm the Rodney Dangerfield of rectors. Because, I get, like, there's a 93-year-old man, and he's got a Purple Heart. His plane went down in the North Atlantic. And he said to me one day after, dealing with me the way he deals with me every Sunday morning, he goes, I'm not giving you crap, I'm fertilizing you. So I think there's two pieces to that. One is there's so much of and I'm ancient in terms of when I was in seminary and stuff, but there's so much of the formation that can be a hook about what we called, and this is how long ago it was, father and mother knows best. And so when people would, come and say, do you think the flowers could be orange or yellow? Early, I think that yellow is appropriate for the season of Lent, and we have to, or whatever, right? So I think part of it is not stepping into that space, because what happens is, and it's what we see in congregations in lovely ways, people will step in, they know how to do, there is a 10-year-old, or 11, how old is Ben, Linda? 12-year-old, and his sister who's like 9, and if I drop dead at the altar, they've memorized the service, and both of them, they'd step in. They could. So I think part of it is for clergy checking our stuff. So and also honoring when people have questions that they have. The other part is that asking people how to do the work. I mentioned Jane. Jane was at everything. It'd be 90 degrees out, and Jane would be sitting, at something at the Ferguson Strait Festival, and that's, people know how to do this work, and they're doing it not because it's their job, they're doing it because it's who they are. And so I would say that for me anyway, and I'm just, I don't know that that's anything anybody should universalize or treat as an archetype. But part of it was, somebody said to me once, it takes 3 years to get through seminary and 5 years to get over it. It took me longer. And so the not being in a role where people can be doing the work and I can listen and learn, and then and people will, just, when we were doing all the food work after Michael Brown was killed, if there are people just there from, early morning till late at night, people loading up their cars and driving into neighborhoods that were, so anyway, that's my response.
One of the things I started doing very early was telling people, I can't do this by myself. I don't have any intention of doing this by myself. So we engaged outside resources as well as parishioners in that process. All of our volunteers are trained in safe food handling. We had the state to come in and do that training for us. We're a licensed a meal. We engage other people in working with our volunteers about hospitality. I will quickly tell folks, I don't have it all, I don't know it all, but I have a vision. And a part of that vision is also including your vision to shape this ministry. We never started off with this ministry of just being a place to receive a hot meal. It was also about advocacy, working with different groups to change laws to make them better. I can't handle that all by myself. So we have engaged a number of partners in that work. Something else that came to me some years ago was people wanted to register our guests, do voter registration. And I said, well, our guests have an hour to eat. We don't want you interfering with the mealtime, but set up a table and come on and let's register our folks. And so for us, it's always been about engaging the other to assist. I hope this is answering your question. Because the more partners that you involve in that ministry whose interests are common to what you're trying to accomplish, you build a much larger team of advocates for what that ministry is.
Yep.
But that's worked for us.
Alan, you want to close us up?
Yeah, we have one question from our live stream audience.
All right.
What music gives you both life?
I've been on a, James Brown, Tower of Power kind of meme. So, funk and, so that's what's I've been listening to. Yeah.
I love gospel music.
People.
I play gospel music all the time, but I will also tell you, in my car, I've got a variety of CDs, and yesterday morning I drove in listening to Michael Jackson.
Right.
So it just depends what hits me to make me move.
Well, we'll be making some music here at 12:05 for the Eucharist, and keep allowing all these voices to wash over you and continue the conversation and asking that question for yourself and your own community. Where is God calling you? What mending is God calling your church community into? So, but we will be back here at 12:05 for the Holy Eucharist, and we look forward to seeing you then.